Okay, Congress, we're going to make a start. If I can get your attention, please. And can those of you who want to take seats, take them now. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome back. I hope you've had a great lunch from the team here at Rochdale Town Hall. So, as mentioned before, we have got a range of breakout sessions which people are attending in our 3 different breakout spaces. But for those of you joining me this afternoon in the Great Hall and the Marquee, we've got a fantastic panel of speakers here for you. We're going to show you what the new pioneers of Greater Manchester are doing now, 180 years later, to build a fair and equitable world. Now, this morning, for those of you that were here, we invoked the power of Rochdale Town Hall to see what we thought the pioneers might think of the success that they've achieved. Now, I'm just wondering, could you tell us, Town Hall, what the pioneers might be doing now? So I don't know that they would be breakdancing, but just to give you the breadth of co-ops, the business support programme that Steve from the Cooperative Bank mentioned earlier today, one of the co-ops that has been recently started is the Birmingham Dance Cooperative. And we find that creatives in particular lend well to the co-op model. So it's something we're going to be talking about. So in this session, we'll hear what the new cooperative pioneers are doing, from healthcare to digital infrastructure. And we're going to feature an in-depth session with both Middleton Co-operating and Beyond the Music. But first, I'm going to hand over to someone who knows all about why it's so important to organise, to come together and to effect change. I am delighted to introduce commentator and journalist Grace Blakeley.
Thanks so much, Rose, and it's great to be here again at Congress for the 2nd year in a row. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about why the cooperative movement is so important in a broader political and economic context. It's really critical that we start by understanding the political context that we find ourselves in, because I don't think it's particularly controversial to say anymore that politics in this country is broken. Trust in political institutions is at all-time lows. Just 9% of people say they trust any political party, including the ones that they voted for. Turnout has been getting lower, especially when you look at it as a percentage of people who are eligible to vote. And there is a widespread mistrust of political elites. It's easy to dismiss this as a kind of uninformed populism and say that, people just aren't educated enough, and if they only understood the way that politics really works, they would have more faith in the system. But it's rooted in lived experience. A record 26% of people say they are struggling to live on their current income, up from 16% before the pandemic. The proportion who say they're living comfortably has fallen over the same period from 50% to a record low of 35%. 1 in 5 people in the UK are living in poverty, of which 4.3 million are children, which means that a third of children in the UK are living in poverty. What's remarkable about these statistics as well is how stable that they've been over time. There's been no improvement in the UK's poverty statistics over 20 years, meaning many people have lived with a constant spectre of poverty and disenfranchisement across their whole lives. Meanwhile, the UK's richest families hold more wealth than 50% of the population. Certain parts of the country, as we know, are more affected by this than others. Regional inequality in the UK remains comparatively high, and poverty exists all across the UK. But what marks out the kind of left behind communities, as our politicians call them, is a sense that things are not going to get any better, no matter what they do, no matter who's elected. This sense of powerlessness is fueling a deep crisis of despair. One study in the Lancet Medical Journal found that there were at least 46,000 deaths of despair in the UK over 2019 and 2020. Twice as many people lost their lives to deaths of despair in the northeast of England as in London. Of the 20 local authorities that have the highest rates of deaths of despair, 16 are in the north. Unsurprisingly, these are the places where the rejection of political elites runs deepest. far from being an irrational response to a well-functioning system or the result of a lack of information. This rejection represents a rejection of a political class that has promised the world and delivered so little. I remember door knocking at several of the last several elections, and I encountered this same attitude again and again. You know, I would knock on someone's door and they would open the door kind of suspiciously, and then you would say, I'm here to talk to you about the election and try to figure out who you're voting for. And there would always be an attitude of, at first, suspicion. I would say, you know, what are your priorities? Often it came down to the economy. I remember a few people, you know, just, again, rehashing this question of how's any of this stuff going to get paid for? But when you go a little bit deeper, it's more than just skepticism about fiscal policy. There is a deep skepticism about the promises that are made by politicians at election time that they will ever be delivered. And I think that skepticism has only deepened over the course of the last several years of even this Labour government. And you can see why. The political class in Westminster seems out of touch enough to propose cuts to welfare at the same time as backtracking on closing a loophole to tax non-doms, some of the richest people in the country. Why is there such a gulf today between ruler and ruled? My book, Vulture Capitalism, argues that politics and economics aren't separate. What happens in the state reflects the balance of power in the economy and society more broadly. You know, we have this weird view sometimes in liberal politics that the billionaires are quite happy to kind of sit over here in the realm of the economy and let the politicians do their thing. And of course, we know now that that's very clearly not how it works. Just look at what's been going on in the US. But that's also something that's been happening here. Look at PPE procurement scandals. Look at private equity claiming that they got a massive win when Rachel Reeves climbed down on taxing carried interest. Look at the Greensill scandal, which I write about in my book. You know, there was a company, Greensill Capital, that hired our former Prime Minister, David Cameron, as a lobbyist, only for when that company got into trouble during the pandemic, this guy to fire off a bunch of texts to people in the Bank of England, the Treasury, saying, we need a bailout. That company went under with £300 million of taxpayers' money. If you are a struggling single mother, you don't get to text the governor of the Bank of England and say, I need a hand. That just shows the differences in access to our political class that happen depending on where you are in the economic spectrum. And these are not just individual examples of wrongdoing. They show us how the system works. Economic and political power are interchangeable, and everyone knows it. This doesn't come as a surprise when you talk to people on the streets about how power works in this country. In an economy built in the interests of the few, it is only natural that politics bends towards their interests too. So people become disillusioned and disenfranchised. They start to feel that politicians are all the same and that no matter how they vote, nothing is going to change. And for me, it's this sense of powerlessness that has become the defining political emotion of our age. And that, I think, is what is threatening democracy so much today. It is this sense of powerlessness, that no matter what you do, there's nothing that is going to change about the system that rules you. There's a story that I think is relevant here from Italy during the emergence of fascism, when Mussolini was coming to power. Mussolini was a former socialist, and his metaphor, where the word fascism comes from, is from the Roman weapon, the fasces. And this is a bundle of sticks that's tied together with an axe in the middle. And the idea is that one stick is very easy to break, but a bundle of sticks is very hard to break. This obviously connects to the long-standing metaphor used by the trade union movement of one finger, hard to break, a raised fist, one finger easy to break, a raised fist, much harder to break. And this language that appeals to so many people is a language of coming together and becoming empowered by building something bigger than themselves. That's how fascism becomes rooted in these communities. It's among people who feel alone, who feel lost, disempowered, and ignored, and want to have a sense of agency again. That's why people like Donald Trump succeed, right? It's because people who feel powerless, people who feel alone, project their sense of agency onto someone who makes them feel strong. And that is the danger that we are living with today. It's in an economy and a society that has become so concentrated, that has become so unequal, in which so many people feel so isolated and so disempowered, that it is the far right that is going to end up benefiting from all of those trends. How do we get here? So we all know about, the neoliberal transformation of the economy in the 1980s. I'm not going to go into all of that too much. But I want us to really think about what happened during that moment, because we're often told it was about shrinking the state and freeing the market. Now, in my latest book, Vulture Capitalism, I showed that that is not true. That's not what happened under neoliberalism. You didn't get a smaller state. Just ask the striking miners that were, beaten by police. Just ask the banks that were bailed out in the 2008 financial crisis. Just ask the massive monopolies that dominate our economy about the free market. That wasn't what happened. States didn't shrink. Markets didn't become free. Neoliberalism wasn't about shrinking the state. It was about crushing the collective power of ordinary people. It was about making it harder to resist. In the 70s, we faced what one French sociologist has called a crisis of ungovernability. It wasn't that the state had gotten too big, it was that people had gotten too confident. It wasn't just that workers were out demanding wages in line with inflation. They were demanding voice in the corporations in which they were working. You had an anti-apartheid movement, a peace movement, an environmental movement that was gaining power everywhere. And that was scary. What we saw in the 1980s was that those movements were crushed, sometimes using force, sometimes using legal avenues. But the greatest success of neoliberalism was an ideological shift. It implanted in all of us the belief that we are alone and we have to fight each other to survive. We saw this shift of workers not being workers anymore. Instead, they were entrepreneurs. So, back in the 50s and 60s, if we were going through a cost of living crisis, you couldn't afford anything, your co-workers couldn't afford anything, you'd probably talk to each other and say, well, we should do something about this. Today, you're much more likely to blame yourself and take out a high-interest payday loan. Citizens became consumers of public services, unable to really properly engage in democratic debate. Communities became isolated little households. We're all so busy competing with each other that we've forgotten how to work together to change the system. In other words, the reason that we feel powerless is that we are supposed to feel powerless. It makes us easier to govern. Today, even though a lot of us know the system is broken, we're struggling to conceive of how we might come together to change it. But today, I think this is starting to change. And a lot of the people who are creating that change are here in this room right now. People are coming together to challenge our centralized politics and build power in their workplaces, in their communities, and on the streets. And they are guided by this knowledge that I think has really been at the heart of the progressive movement since its inception, and that we've lost something of recently. Because progressive politics, the left, it didn't start when an intellectual kind of rode down into a community and said, have you guys considered starting a union? It would be great for class consciousness. It started because people were facing daily problems in their lives, and they knew that the only way to fight back against the people who were exploiting them was if they worked together, because they had a sense of the meaning of community, of collective power. And today, I think we are regaining some of that sense, albeit from a very low base. We're seeing how workers are coming together and forming their own cooperatives, forming worker buyout committees to take over the places that they work. Communities resisting the hollowing out of their places, forming energy co-ops and community land trusts and farming co-ops. And government is starting to take notice. We're seeing many of these co-ops being supported at the local level, and I know people in this room will be familiar with this, through, for example, procurement processes, through the community wealth building agenda. And this is why the cooperative movement can be so revolutionary, because it strikes at the heart of the ideology that keeps us disempowered, that keeps us believing that no matter what we do, no matter who we vote for, nothing's going to change, that keeps us believing that we have to wait for someone else to come and save us. When we build power in our communities, in our workplaces, in our societies, we learn that we are not alone, that we are stronger together, and that above all, nobody's coming to save us. And that isn't a point of pessimism, it's a point of hope, because we know from history, from the history of these movements, from the history of progressive politics, from the history of this town, that when we work together, we're capable of saving ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Grace. Some really strong words there. Thank you. The best, or one of the best examples I've seen of people coming together under a cooperative is right here in Rochdale, in a town down the road called Middleton. So I'm going to ask now Kallum, Nolan to tell you a little bit about Middleton Co-operating.
Cheers, Rose. How good is this? Is it good to be alive in Rochdale on a Friday afternoon or what? Make some noise. Come on, Congress. This is cool, lads. So, for those of you who don't know, Middleton is a town about 5 miles south of here, and it's part of Rochdale Borough. And I'm Kallum, one of the founding members of Middleton Co-operating. And our story started in about 2019. And it started with a cotton mill, Warwick Mill, which I hope you'll see on the images on the screen at some point. Warwick Mill, it's a huge derelict building that towers over Middleton town centre, and many people in this room, including our councillors, know how much of a blot on Middleton this mill's been. It's 5 stories high, it's 250,000 square feet, and it's been fully empty for over 10 years, and about 90% of it's been empty for decades more. And it's a reminder for every Middletonian of what was and what could have been. So, in 2019, fellow founder of Middleton Co-operating, Mark Fraser, who's at the back, give us a wave, Mark, invited me and a few other Middletonians to a wonderful pub called the Old Boar's Head. If you're passing through Middleton on your way back home, down south maybe, please do check it out. And we discussed ways in which the community could perhaps assist the council in building a case to take the mill into public ownership. And we dreamt of how the mill could become a community asset, how it could be a bustling hub that sings and dances about cooperation and community wealth building. Imagine a building that has community-owned social housing, a community cinema, a food hall with locally owned bars and restaurants and other shops and businesses and trade and services that are all working together cooperatively and for the benefit of Middleton. How cool would that be? So then myself and Mark and the rest of the Old Boar's Head got quite excited and maybe quite merry, a little bit drunk maybe, and we formed the Warwick Mill Action Group. And we had some great meetings with the council and co-op people like yourselves up and down the country who really love the vision, but we all agreed that it could take years to implement anything to do with the mill. So while we kept our fingers crossed that something wonderful could happen, and I know the council have been grafting and grafting for years to make something happen with this mill, but national property law makes it an absolute nightmare, as I'm sure our councillors will agree. We decided to take the vision of cooperation and community wealth building out of the confines of a building and turn Warwick Mill Action Group into Middleton Co-operating, a community benefit society that just wants to do good things in Middleton. So during lockdown, we held dozens of Zoom meetings with co-op experts and Middleton residents to co-design the rules for our community benefit society. And now we have 170 members and we operate in circles. The creation of a Greater Manchester Tenants Union branch in Middleton was the beginning of one of our first circles. Through our members, we realised that there was a problem with people living in poor living conditions on social housing on the Langley estate. Middleton Co-operating helped form a tenants union, which led to support for dozens of residents on Langley. This was typical wealth extraction, taking social rents out of our community and not being a responsible landlord. Now those residents have gone from feeling isolated and helpless to not only living in healthier living conditions, but turning into proper community leaders who now run their own branch, which has been amazing to witness. As well as forming a digital inclusion circle, MIDI Digi, which helps get people online, we're really proud of Middleton Community Energy, our energy co-op, which is led by local residents and works closely with the council and is looking to install wind turbines and solar panels very soon in this borough. These are community-led groups taking proper action, working with anchor institutions to implement positive change. Then, Middleton Co-operating teamed up with the Culture Co-op. A few of the Culture Co-op people are here, and I want you to make some noise, Culture Co-op people. The Culture Co-op's a consortium of partners across Rochdale, and we all came together to get a group of residents together in Middleton to ask them what they'd like to see in our town in regards to culture. As a residents group, we brainstormed and decided that we'd love to see a community art space in Middleton Shopping Centre. I remember the shopping centre management looking at me like I had 2 heads when I asked them for 12 months rent-free, but we got there. And well, in November last year, Arts House Middleton opened its doors, and it's since engaged over 3,000 people in high-quality arts and free-to-access workshops, and all decisions and projects are led by Middleton residents, and long may it continue. And I just want to give a massive pat on the back to the Culture Co-op, who are doing amazing work like that right across Rochdale. So I'm running out of time now, and I could go on for hours and hours about Middleton Co-operating, but I hope it gives you a little snapshot of what we're about and how communities can make progress when working cooperatively. Moving forward, we're expanding on circles around early years, sustainable food, health and alternative education, green spaces, and a focus on the town centre, where we want to see community wealth building, not wealth extraction. We want to see local businesses on our high street, so the money spent stays local. None of us want to see the same old Betfreds and cash generators and subways in our town centres. Which brings me back to the mill. Some of you may have heard that a mayoral development corporation is coming to Middleton, which basically brings greater powers to the local authority to develop and hopefully slap compulsory purchase orders on troublesome buildings such as the Warwick Mill. And I want to give a big round of applause to Andy Burnham and our Middleton councillors, two of which I can see here, Kath and Sue, for finally getting that over the line. With Rochdale being the home of the pioneers, the home of cooperation, and with so much community-led activity going on across the borough, wouldn't it be wonderful, romantic even, if the 5-storey blot on Middleton skyline finally ended up in the hands of the community that it's plagued for so long? Place-based co-ops and place-based action is where it's at, Congress. Thank you very much.
They really are a phenomenal bunch. Grace touched on it earlier. You will all know this. It's really difficult when you're trying to explain to people what a co-op are. It's not on our education system, our media doesn't talk about it. It's really difficult to get media. This week we've had 400 international visitors from 59 countries in Manchester, and the general response from the media was, nah. So, Middleton Co-operating are very, very fortunate because they've got someone who's helping them give voice and has also been helping give voice to the cooperative movement this morning on BBC Breakfast, on the Today programme, in fact, on anyone that would listen. So I'm going to invite a local lad now to come and have a chat with Grace about why he's given his voice to the cooperative movement. Can I welcome to the stage, please, Steve Coogan? That was brilliant.
You do, don't you? I think I'm still mic'd up, yeah.
Is that on? Yeah?
Yeah.
Hello, great.
You're a
great.
pro.
Yeah. Semi.
So, Steve, thank you so much for being here with us today. Can you just start by talking a little bit of how you got involved in Middleton Co-op and why this has become such a kind of passionate topic for you?
Well, I've always been interested in politics. I always, you know, and when I had an emerging profile about 20 years ago when I started to become well known, people would ask me to be involved in things, and I sometimes did and sometimes didn't. And now it happens more and more. I enjoy what I do, but I also take an interest in geopolitics, local politics, national politics, and but I became sort of quite disillusioned recently because of certainly because of the way politics was going, the way the disillusionment with what happened after the last Labour government, and then we had the alliance with Lib Dems, and then Labour came back with, Keir Starmer is someone I found very disappointing. So I felt like I just was disengaged with politics.
Politically homeless.
Politically homeless, like a lot of people. And then I was invited to get involved with the Lighthouse Project in Middleton, which is this led by the community, a sort of one-stop shop for providing debt counselling, food banks, food clubs, assistance with applying for jobs, how to use computers, basic skills, cookery skills, walking clubs, men's workshops type thing, a whole sort of one-stop shop, language stuff, psychiatric counselling for soldiers with PTSD, everything all under one roof. And what was impressed about it was that it wasn't government-led. It was from the ground up. And Mark Fraser, who was mentioned earlier, pointed me in the direction of this organisation. And then when I heard they were launching Middleton Co-operating, kind of as a springboard for a way of doing things differently, it sort of dovetailed with my disillusionment with national politics. A, because it seems to have chosen to lean into the status quo, to not do anything about it. I feel like the Labour Party is putting band-aids on the side of the Titanic, and and that nothing's going to change. I think they've made their core, which is we're a little bit nicer than the Tories, but this is the world we live in. There's nothing we can do about it. All we can do as a national party is maybe mitigate the worst excesses of this system, which is a really fatalistic, defeatist attitude. And I couldn't go along with it. I felt like it was really bleak, a real bleak, cynical worldview. And so when I hear about someone actually, the idea of these, what pre-exist anyway, the co-op has a 180-year history, as we know, of people who empowered themselves, these organizations that are outside government. I thought, well, you can't change the world, but you can affect change at a local level and hope the idea catches on.
Yeah.
And it is actually, when you look back in history, it's how the world has often changed. It's started that way. It's not because of an enlightened government just comes along. That never works out well. In fact, when that does happen, it always loses its way very fast. So that's why I'm involved in helping Middleton Co-operating, just as a way of trying to make a difference on that, in a way that's tangible and you can measure it, and it's demonstrably worked. In fact, the rest of the world seems to have been more successful with co-ops than the country that gave birth to it, and which is a crying shame. And so I'm re-engaged in politics because I can see something that's achievable, and all we really want government to do is it's not only that people in the post-industrial landscape have their hands tied behind the back, they've got their hands tied behind the back economically because of globalization, and they've also got the corporate world with its foot on their neck. And all we want really is the government to tell people to get out of our way and facilitate fertile conditions for community-led empowerment to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, as you kind of mentioned there, you've been a really powerful voice in progressive politics for a long time now. How do you think that the cooperative movement can feed into progressive political change at the national level? How do you think it can provide a foundation for the kind of change we want to see?
Well, I think as long as people shine a light on it, it can demonstrate the way forward. In some ways, the government should lean into it because it abrogates some of their responsibility. It's like, in fact, in America, I believe they're seen as a sort of Republican thing that aligns with small government, oddly. But it shows you how it can, we know that politics, of course, isn't just linear now, it's sort of three-dimensional. And if something can demonstrate its efficacy, then why wouldn't government adopt it? Especially if it's taking some of the heat away from them. It's like, just help people to help themselves. If you can show that it works, then they will come, as it were. We're asking, is that the whole thing of giving everyone a fishing rod so that they can catch their own fish? Most working people don't want this sort of middle-class, patronising, sort of top-down benevolence. They just want to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So give them the means to catch their own fish. The thing that compounds it at the moment is the fact that there are big corporate behemoths that have a trawler net that come along and nick all the fish.
Literally.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're obviously from Middleton. What do you think are the barriers that are maybe in the way of people starting to get involved in this stuff and spreading it around?
Well, cynicism, which is contagious. I mean, that has... it's also a genuine alternative being provided. I mean, look at what's happened. The reason reform does so well is I lay the blame of that squarely at the feet of the neoliberal consensus of the Labour Party, as much as the Conservative Party, frankly, in its failure to deliver for ordinary working people, as you've explained earlier. So people just think, well, we might as well kick the table over. And I understand it, frankly. And in some ways, when Reform did make those gains, I thought, well, maybe it's a bloody nose that the Labour Party needs to get it to refocus on where its priorities should be. So, and in some ways, the fact that you can still disrupt politics gives me hope, because we just need someone to disrupt it in the right way and not blame one group of people, which we saw in Weimar Germany a long time ago. So that's what, I think it's a case of providing a real alternative. You could, creating another party. The problem with that as an option, and something I can entirely understand, is if you do it from the top down again, it just looks like another choice. I think there's something more potentially revolutionary, with a small r, right, in these grassroots movements, demonstrating it first, and then people wanting to support that, and that's how people come to power. Is that you sort of, it's power in reverse, it's empowerment in reverse, and not, like you say, waiting for a savior. No.
So we've talked a little bit about the kind of dysfunctionality, let's say, of Westminster politics, but there are obviously Labour councils and Green councils and Lib Dem councils all over the country that are passionate about this sort of stuff, and you've obviously had to work with the council. What can councils and local government in general and local stakeholders do to support the emergence of this movement?
It's obviously we need to work hand in glove with local government. It's not every man for himself. We have to work together. I hope that local government sees Middleton Co-operating and other cooperatives as an asset, as an ally. There might be slightly different methodology, but we all want the same thing: to change the circumstances of people who are either struggling or might even be working and struggling, but to change the outlook and the psychology and the mentality of people who feel like they have no power and have no choice. It all becomes self-fulfilling. As soon as people feel that they have agency, they start to perform better, they start to be healthier. Everything, success breeds success. But we know things can change. I mean, Andy Burnham has, moved from national politics to Manchester to local politics, and actually, probably by his own admission, has achieved a lot more than when he was on the national stage. And so, of course, we need to work hand in glove with councils. But we're ready to rock.
Sick. Right, I'm going to hand back over to Rose then. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Stay there. Okay, so from one end of the spectrum in Greater Manchester to the other, this next cooperative has been trying to bring private businesses, creative artists and individuals together to affect change. So I'd like to welcome now the Managing Director of Beyond the Music, Sarah Pearson.
Good afternoon, Congress. How are you? Hope you're well. So I'm co-founder of Beyond the Music with Ollie Wilson and Chair Rose Marley, the brilliant Rose Marley. Beyond the Music is the world's first cooperative global music and content conference and festival that takes place annually in Manchester and is only in its third year. And by content, I mean film, TV, gaming, and innovation, in which music is the link, the glue that binds them all together. This cross-sector cooperation has not been considered before. We brought together a pioneering alliance of Manchester venues, public bodies, and trade bodies, reflecting Greater Manchester's commitment to driving meaningful change in the music and content industry, and provide a solid foundation from which to grow the northern music and content ecosystem. This comes at a crucial time in music and culture as we see the industrial destruction of these industries alongside the dismantling of creative ecosystems and pathways. Beyond the Music launched at South by Southwest in 2023 with Ambassadors New Order playing a show at the iconic Moody Theatre. Since then, Beyond the Music has hosted political leaders, innovators, executives, pop icons, influenced industry culture change and policy. It's provided a stage for accountability and transparency. It's a platform for hundreds of new artists and their teams searching for record deals, festival bookings and more, and it's showcased struggling grassroots venues in Manchester. Acclaim has come from all quarters, we're pleased to say, business, audience, artists and media. Beyond the Music has achieved a lot in its first 2 years, but the journey has not been easy. Starting a business from the ground up, as I'm sure you all know, is hard enough without having to juggle members and competitors' differing agendas and trying to work against the present system that is based from a place of fear, not collaboration. But through all that, when you see that change is coming about, it is making a difference, well, that's inspiring, as I'm sure you can all allude to. There is hope in cooperation. So why does Beyond the Music need to exist, and why as a cooperative? To explain that, I need to start at the end. It's somewhat unusual to begin by referencing the end, but I believe that's exactly where we are. Not an abstract end, but a structural one. The end of a system that has long dictated the value of music and culture, who controls it, and who benefits. We're at a crossroads where systems built on individualism, extraction, and competitive siloing are failing us all, economically, culturally, and socially. So how do we reconfigure? The answer is, of course, cooperation, not as sentiment, but as infrastructure. At its heart, cooperation acknowledges something very basic, but very important. We are interdependent beings. We live side by side. And while much of our economic and business language assumes self-interest, and much political and social media language sows divide over commonality, most people, in fact, are caring, are of collaboration, have more in common, and enjoy and thrive when building together, when given the structures and trust to do so. Most systems we operate within assume competition, not collaboration. Whether it's in policy, education, or culture, the dominant mindset is not how we share, but how we outpace, how we outperform, and increasingly outlast. Nowhere is this more evident than in how we teach business and entrepreneurship. For decades, we've privileged a singular narrative, the individualistic founder, the winner who takes all. Ruthlessness has been rebranded as vision. Exclusion has been mistaken for focus. But that model is breaking down. In a world defined by overlapping crises, ecological, political, economic, the notion that success is a solo pursuit is outdated. To survive and evolve, we will need to unlearn much of what we've been taught about how business works, and to unpick that to truly reimagine entrepreneurship as cooperative, ethical, and sustainable is one of the greatest challenges of our time. That brings me to the creative industries, particularly music. Music is one of the UK's major exports, and it's growing. In 2023, it was worth 4.6 billion and is embedded in our cultural identity. Yet the industry is suffering from a profound paradox: rapid growth paired with deep fragility. Artists, creators, the individuals driving that cultural value are consistently the last to be paid, the least protected, and the first to be replaced or displaced. We've reached a point where playlist algorithms are narrowing choice. AI-generated music is about to saturate platforms, and intellectual property, once protected by laws designed to safeguard originality, and begun with Queen Anne a very long time ago, is routinely violated, and the government does not seem intent on protecting this. Platforms for new music are being eroded and minimized due to economic impossibility, and places to meet, to develop networks, are crumbling. While this may seem niche to some, it's a bellwether for something broader. the loss of small venues, of music in state schools, of rehearsal space in post-industrial cities. These are not just local challenges. They represent a systemic undervaluing of culture as a form of public good. At the same time, consolidation within global media and tech companies has created a situation where a number of platforms dictate what is visible, discoverable, and financially viable. That's not a marketplace, it's a bottleneck. The result is a cultural economy that is increasingly extractive rather than generative. Music wants a vehicle for dissent, for celebration, for collective memory, for community, is becoming ambient background to a system built for someone else's metrics. What's at stake is not simply the livelihoods of artists, content creators, and their teams. It's our cultural sovereignty. But there are alternatives. Cooperative approaches to content creation, data governance, and platform ownership are not only possible, they are emerging. We're seeing models where artists own stakes in distribution, where fans can invest ethically in the ecosystems they care about, and where rights are not just protected, but actively negotiated and upheld. These alternatives, though, require intent. They require policy support, legal reform, education, and funding models that reflect the actual value of creative labor and not just its perceived profitability. Not everything that matters can be monetized, but that doesn't mean it lacks economic impact. Creativity underpins everything from tourism to mental health to global reputation. To ignore it is short-sighted and self-destructive. We're not facing a creative deficit, we're facing a structural failure to support creativity. And unless we intervene, we will look back on this period as one where enormous cultural value was quietly, softly erased. This is where cooperation becomes more than an ethical preference. It becomes a necessity. We need to have a profound understanding of what it means to be a cooperative, what it means to work as part of a cooperative, how to be a good cooperative. But this is not just about the music industry. It's about learning how to work and live differently, about designing systems that prioritize resilience over short-term gain, that foreground people, not platforms. And that doesn't mean they don't need to make money. As many cooperatives show, moving to this model can increase profitability. We're not naive about the scale of this challenge, but neither are we cynical. This is not a nostalgic call for a return to the past. It's an invitation to build a future grounded in solidarity, agency, and trust. And so I return to where I began. If we are at an ending, let it also be a beginning.
Thank you, Sarah. And to join us now for a conversation about that, can I introduce co-founder and co-managing director of Beyond the Music, Ollie Wilson, to the stage. It's fine. Right, Ollie.
Hi.
Sarah's touched on this. What Beyond the Music has achieved has been pretty phenomenal, bringing together, this is what I think is fascinating about this model, those founding members, Co-op Live, Factory International, AO Arena, in their day jobs, they are fiercely competitive, it's fair to say. But they're together, like why, how, has that been easy? And there's more, you know, lots of other businesses have joined the party, but has that been an easy process?
Oh, God, it's been all of those things. It's been easy in some places and difficult in others. And let's just set the context here that, you know, the music industry, I think, is in the worst position it's ever been in for audiences and for fans. And at the same time, in Manchester, we have this influx of people adding to our culture. There is more music in Manchester than there ever has been in its entire history, but it's completely underserved by the industry. You know, the recording industry is broken. You have Spotify extracting billions and the CEO investing in AI military tech startups. And touring's broken as well. 84% of independent artists cannot afford to tour these days. So there's a real pressure point in Manchester at the moment, and I suppose that's what brought us all together in the first place. And I must say, you know, it's great to be from a part of the world where we can bring together the council and the mayor, our three biggest venues and city centre stakeholders to tackle this problem head on. So we're very lucky being here in Manchester and in Greater Manchester, but it is difficult, and we have found it difficult. And I think it's almost a component of capitalist realism, where people can't even envisage a different business model to the one that we've always been used to. And I think what a great piece of psychological engineering has taken place on society over the last however many 100 years, that all we can see is private profit for one person and hyper competitive, you know, how you kind of behave. So, and yeah, just conceptually, switching people on to what a cooperative is and how a cooperative works. And as you said, the music industry is really competitive. I mean, I'm sure every industry is, but explaining to people and getting them to understand truly what a cooperative is. I think we've done some real education work, to be honest with you, with all of our partners, and not just the ones in Manchester, but you know, we're often in London meeting partners in the music business down there, and sometimes I feel like I'm in a foreign land trying to transmit ideas in a foreign language, and we are managing to get there, and we have done great work bringing people together at Beyond the Music, and that's the way to do it, isn't it? You know, show, don't tell. So yeah.
So you're absolutely right. So in Finland, 80% of the population are in a co-op, so you don't have to spend all your time explaining what that exactly is. But I'm interested as well, because Grace, I know it's research you're doing at the moment, because I remember Sarah and yourself, Ollie, ringing all the different labels and trade bodies and trying to get them to work together. And they'd almost get there. They'd go, yeah, and then they'd be like, oh, but I need to do my bit over here. So like, Grace, you might want to chip in and ask some questions on that. But how was that?
Yeah, I mean, so some have come on board and some haven't. And sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, so the question is about that idea of getting people to work together, even like the organisations that aren't necessarily competitive, like member bodies. The idea of getting them to come together as one has been quite a challenge, hasn't it?
But I think they come on board because they realise, like Sarah's saying, they realise it's now a necessity. You know, the whole paradigm in the music industry is changing, and the artist and the audience are going to be firmly in the middle of that business model in the future. And the music industry needs to engage with cooperatives and in a cooperative way. The music industry has a habit of getting left behind with progress and development. So I think they realise that they need to come and sit around a table. It's great at Beyond the Music. We've had people sat around a table that never would have spoken to each other before, perhaps 4 or 5 different organisations, and we've been making progress on conversations about grassroots venues, mental health, and of course the existential crises in the music industry at the moment, which is AI. And we're not going to tackle that as an individual. We need to tackle that collaboratively for it to work.
Do you see any kind of resistance to that attempt to bring people together and collaborate, almost to kind of confront the power of those big companies? Or is it just, you know, everyone's great with it?
I think people are just set in their ways, to be honest with you. And, you know, these companies have been around for a very, very long time. But if they don't get with the program, they will get left behind. And, you know, that's the good thing about Beyond the Music. It's not just the big businesses that we bring together. We also bring all of the independents and the new artists and this whole new cultural revolution waiting to happen in Manchester at the moment. So, you know, I think it's good for, essentially, we're seeing it Beyond the Music, the new industry develop around the old, and I think the old will crumble away eventually, and it's this new wave. It's so refreshing, having worked in the industry for 20 years and dealing with narcissistic, hyper-competitive capitalists. It's so refreshing to work with young people in the industry now who only believe in collaboration and everything they do in collaboration, and I'm learning a lot from them.
And do you feel like there's a suspicion? We were talking about this earlier, because it's like, look, Ollie, you could have set up Beyond the Music as a private business and be, you know, taking all the profits, but you didn't. I'm always interested, something to do with possibly your heritage as to why you didn't take that. But in my experience, people then are trying to find out, like, what is your plan? You know, what is it really that you're doing? Have you experienced that mistrust, or, you know, what made you kind of go, I don't want to own this, I want to share it?
I think people don't mistrust, people just misunderstand, and they just don't know. And this is why one of the really important things is like educating people, but it's about how do we reach out to people and engage them. So we've been doing some research, haven't we, Rose, on different tech platforms that you can use to engage people in conversation and decision-making process, and making it accessible, making it real, making it something that people can see in front of them, because people don't know what it looks like yet. And that has been really interesting. And what I'm finding is that you need to go directly to people. You can't expect people to come off the main 2-3 apps that they use.
Do you feel that because my empathy with what you're saying on a personal level is being creative, and I am an entrepreneur, even whether I like it or not. But do you find that because it's not measurable, that it's isn't that the case? That's always been the case for the arts. Is trying to, you can't. There's no metric you can measure it, because we all know that the arts enlighten us, make us feel human in a way that is not measurable.
Yeah, it's not tangible. You can't put it on a spreadsheet, can you? You know, you can't put it on the profit and loss, and that is an issue, and especially when you're dealing with institutions who are very much about the top and the bottom line. Well, and it's always been a problem for me running social enterprises. Is you know, they can't put it on the spreadsheet. They're not investing in bricks and mortar or computers. They're investing in people, which is hard to make work.
It doesn't help when good creative people get commodified to sell banking. You know, and you see something like a poem by some northerner, and you think, this is an advert for a bank. Christ.
Yeah.
But that is the sort of the commodification of something that, by its nature, should always resist that kind of exploitation in a way.
And music has become commodified, and so have the artists. You know, they've become pieces of data in this really abstract music market, and that's the result of the global corporations like Spotify and etc. And that's why co-ops are really important, because they're grounded in locality, and that's super important for the next musical revolution which is coming.
Right, okay, start getting your questions ready, everybody, because we are going to be opening this session out, and Shirley's got a mic and we'll be taking questions in the marquee as well. So I'm just going to, we've touched on Middleton Co-operating and Beyond the Music Cooperative, but there are so many cooperatives in Greater Manchester, 260 to be precise. So I'm hoping that my slides are going to come up so I can show you a little bit more about these cooperatives. But in Greater Manchester, yeah, we've got this rich wealth and history of cooperation. And of those 260 cooperatives, we've got a whole breadth. As with the whole cooperative movement, you know, the cooperative movement, just 7,000 organisations in the UK bring 43 billion into the UK. And what's important about that 43 billion is that it predominantly stays in the UK and in the pockets and the work of in the area. So, you know, there's a real community wealth piece there that's really important. But like I say, in Greater Manchester, we've been building that out for many years, and across the whole of the cooperative movement, whether it's energy, housing, consumer, retail, there is this whole kind of every sector is growing. I'm not sure I'm going to get this slide, so I'll just tell you that the biggest area of growth in Greater Manchester is in social clubs and the development of community cooperatives. You've got the likes of music venues, trust saving venues as well within the local area. But some of the specific cooperatives that I wanted to talk about, because they're really interesting, we've got here right on the front row, we've got Sean from the Cooperative Network Infrastructure based out of Ashton Old Baths. This is stuff you can't see. This is what happens to the connectivity of the whole country under the ground. And if you spend any time with Sean, you'll find out that that is a really exploitative, extractive, competitive business world. I mean, and it's ridiculous. All of you will be highly frustrated whenever you see roadworks being dug up and then 3 weeks later the same place being dug up. So Sean and the team have come up with this really innovative model to make sure that actually you work together. So the members of the cooperative, yes, there are public bodies like the councils and the NHS who make sure that the assets, so lampposts to put WAPs on or tram lines to put fibre in, are available. And then other members will be the telcos. And actually, right, when you're trying to get from A to B, and it might be, again, too costly for one particular commercial organisation to invest specifically in that line. Well, actually, what about jumping on each other's lines? And what about working cooperatively there? So that's the cooperative network infrastructure. And if you can get a tour around Ashton Old Baths, you know, just absolutely do that. And that's just one of the cooperatives that Sean's involved in. He is absolutely a serial cooperator. So other cooperatives we've got in Greater Manchester, we've got our members Emerge Recycling. So again, they were so critical in the pandemic, and that power to organise and make sure people were getting fed was really quite phenomenal. What was really interesting with Emerge in the pandemic, because a lot of the creatives couldn't perform and do, and they were all helping. And Ollie, I know you did something, you've got Piecemeal as well, where you helped to feed people, and that came out of the pandemic as well. So Carbon Co-op, they're really innovative. They're trying to retrofit houses and help people make that affordable to do so. And we talked earlier about the idea of scalability, and what I really love about Carbon Co-op is they're quite happy in their own area, but they're very happy to lend their models. So that's now become Loco in Edinburgh. So like sharing the ideas and the models that work in your area is something, again, that's been really strong out of Greater Manchester. You might be familiar with Unicorn Co-op. Again, they do the same thing. They're more than happy with their great business in Charlton, selling to the locality. They're very happy. They're a workers' co-op. They don't want to grow anymore, but they'll happily spend time with other co-ops showing you how to do that. And then social adventures. So this is in care cooperatives. So social adventures were a spin-out, a public mutual spin-out in childcare, cooperative childcare. But also now they are working collaboratively with the local authorities to deliver children's homes as well for residential care. And then our business has taken the model not dissimilar to Beyond the Music, where businesses are brought together. So this was a commission, again, from Greater Manchester to kind of understand what is, the reason it's called our business, because not only is it our business, as in, you know, the businesses own and control it, but it's our business to know and understand what the social economy is like in Greater Manchester and what's working and what isn't and how do we grow it. So again, our business itself is a co-op of social enterprises and inclusive business with 300 members that, again, are all working together to grow that economy. So that's just some of the examples in Greater Manchester. Like I say, there are many more. So now, sadly, our Mayor, Andy Burnham, is very poorly and has not been able to join us today, and he's been poorly all week. But a few weeks ago, possibly why he's poorly, we went to Japan on a Greater Manchester trade mission, and we put together a roundtable with the United Nations, the British and Japanese consulates, the Japanese movement, and here's what Andy had to say.
Labour and cooperative mayor of Greater Manchester, supported by two parties. And through my career, I have had significant involvement with the cooperative movement. Back in Greater Manchester in the 1850s, 1860s, or I think 1840s, the Rochdale pioneers began. Yes, there were jobs in the growing cotton industry, but those jobs did not pay enough for people to cover all of their daily needs. And the cooperative movement sprang up to fill that gap. In the UK, our experience has been that if you make the essentials of life difficult for people to afford, you have a very real problem. And the reality of Greater Manchester today, with all of the economic success we have, the truth is many hundreds of thousands of our residents are struggling with the effects of the cost of living crisis in the UK. Homes are too expensive. We have a housing crisis as well as a cost of living crisis. Water bills are too high. Energy bills, the same. Public transport, the same. And it feels to me, as Mayor of Greater Manchester, that you have to make the essentials of life affordable to everybody. And our experience has been the privatization and deregulation of those sectors has actually left us in the wrong place in the UK, where people cannot pay for those essentials at an affordable price. Alongside that, the cooperative movement seems to me to have a real role to play in terms of protecting community assets, as Naomi was saying, or things that people really care about. When I was a member of Parliament in the UK Parliament, and in the previous Labour government, we initiated a scheme to help football supporters where clubs were at risk of being broken up and lost, supported them to take control and ownership of their football clubs. And there are many such supporters, cooperative supporters trusts still in the UK today. So I'm saying that I think it's important to focus on where the cooperative movement can really make a difference. And to me, it's on those essentials of life, where they are unaffordable for people. But then secondly, on those community assets that people really care about. And if people take more control and ownership of them, exactly as Naomi was saying, that engenders a real sense of pride. And actually, more than that, I think counters some of the political alienation people feel these days, where they don't feel in control of things. They don't feel they have a meaningful role in their community. And that's why the ideas of the cooperative movement are as relevant today as they were in 1844.
So that was just a very small snippet of the roundtable, and it is available on the Cooperatives UK YouTube channel, and it's a really fascinating discussion, like I say, with our Japanese counterparts. And Steve touched on it earlier about how you know, the rest of the world has kind of taken this model that was invented here and done it somewhat better. And in Japan, they've even built, in Kobe, in the Kansai region, they've even built a replica Toad Lane, like it's not even full size, it's bigger than Toad Lane, it's huge. And so when we go around the world internationally, like, you know, we're the OGs, we're the UK, everybody's like, you know, we like celebrities, and let's say you come back here and nobody's interested, we've got something really wrong. But any of those that are interested, we are now going, it was a real moment there, and like so we had Bev Craig there, the leader of Manchester Council, like I say the United Nations, the General Commissioner for the Osaka region, and we're going to be building out trade links actually with Japan. I was looking to see if any of our Japanese colleagues are in the room, but I think they might be in breakout sessions. I think they're fed up of hearing about the OGs and the new pioneers and what we're doing. But it's this idea that we exported this across the world, and we're not doing incredibly well ourselves. So we're very grateful to our mayor and our city leaders in Rochdale as well for really getting behind us. The UK government has pledged to double the size of the cooperative movement, and so it's down to us really now to make that difference. So, like I said, we're just going to, Sarah, I'm going to ask you to join the chat if that's okay. You can make up Andy's seat. And I'm going to start with, has any of you got any questions for our panel? Because I can speak to them all day. So Shirley's got the mic. And those of you as well in the marquee, the Slido will arrive for you to be able to do that. So looking for questions.
Hi, I'm Anya. I'm from the Meteor, Manchester's independent media. You mentioned before that there's sort of this shortfall in news coverage, but do you think generally there's a problem with storytelling around cooperatives, and like how can we tell better stories, in your view, about cooperatives?
Who wants to go with that one?
I'll have a bash. I would say that you're right about storytelling. Something I'm sometimes engaged in. It is actually incredibly powerful and evidence-based argument, although it's important to encourage that because that's what a democracy is supposed to be. In actual fact, what really persuades people, we know this, is stories. If you make someone laugh and or cry on an emotional level, then you sort of won them over. And I think that kind of, it's a really good point to say that in trying to communicate, we do tell not lies, but stories that's putting something as a story. And there are and will be stories of personal, personal triumphs and people overcoming odds or changing their situation. It'll be littered with them, but it's absolutely right that people are moved by stories of small groups of people or individuals.
Yeah, I'm doing some research on this right now for the next book that I'm going to be writing about these themes of kind of individualism and collective power. And speaking to people who have come into the cooperative movement, various different forms of community organizing, from not really knowing what those things are about, and comparing their experience to the people I'm interviewing who are on the sharp end of hyper-competitive work environments, social isolation, mental ill health, feeling like basically alone in an economy that is not built for them. And when I speak to these people who formed these movements and tell their stories, there is the one thing that comes out consistently through all of those stories is a sense of feeling a sense of power and agency and belonging and community, things that they maybe didn't even realize they were missing until they participated in those movements. So I think it's so important to tell that story on a personal level as well. Like there's so much that we are all missing in our lives because of the way our society is structured, and cooperating is such like a powerful way to get that back.
Sarah, you're a communicator. Sorry, if you would like to give Grace a round of applause, don't let me stop you. Sarah, has it been easy to tell a story?
I was going to say, I think in terms of the media, in terms of all of us here, Rose's job on a daily basis is finding a language in order to tell the stories so that people, when you say to a trade body in the music industry, we're a cooperative, they don't sort of just think, oh no, I want nothing to do with you. Also, like investors, all sorts, they don't understand what a cooperative is. So I think it's that, we need a language around that people are going to understand and align, and it's great to hear that Finland, 80% of people in that country understand what a co-op is, so let's try and do that.
Yeah, I first experienced it with our National Youth Summit, and the National Members Council from Co-op Group were there, and a young girl came over to me discreetly. She said, can I ask a daft question? I was like, no, I'm sure it's not daft. And she said, don't the councils collect the bins? And it's like, we use this term council all the time, and it's like, that's what a council is to most people. It's not a body of democracy, So, yeah, it's really interesting. Right, okay, we've got another question over here.
Hi, yeah, Rob from Ethical Consumer. My question is, do you think cooperative movement could be ruder about shareholder capitalism? When we look at, we've been comparing them to B corporations for the last few years, and B corporations have a narrative about shareholder capitalism failing and them being the answer. And to me, the co-ops are a better answer than a B corporation, but we're really, really shit at saying how bad mainstream capitalism is, and that we're too polite. We sit here going, here, we're a nice alternative. But I think could the movement be ruder? That's my question.
I think yes is the answer. We could all be a lot ruder, yeah. I think that as long as there's a balance to be achieved, because you can be rude, or I could spend all afternoon here just ranting and raving and slagging them off to my heart's content. It would give me a lovely dopamine hit. But I'm not sure what it might achieve in the long term. But I think you're right that certainly, I think if you're going to be angry, you need to have a bit of wit thrown in there to sort of, take the edge off it. But I do think it's as much about providing optimism, because we live in a world where there's so much like noise and atrocious noise between different tribes, and where people don't listen, they just rant at each other and then go home, or turn off their computer. But I do think that there's that we need to, alongside that, you need to offer people hope and something positive and something that makes them smile. People like being angry, but they also like being happy as well. But I think, yes, I take your point. That's a good one.
The other comment, sorry, let's allow the claps. Go for it, Pat. Sorry.
We don't have time.
I'm just on to the next question. No, I'm interested and so, because one of the challenges is about fundraising, in particular for social entrepreneurs, and it's like the way you speak to your investors and the way you speak to, and this is something we've not really touched on, but I think Ollie and Sarah might have a bit to say on this, but quite difficult to fundraise in this context of sharing.
Yeah, yes, in a word. Yes, very difficult to fundraise because you're not offering them like bricks and mortar or things that they usually invest in. But something really interesting happened in the last week or so with Solidad, this new music platform that I've set up. And yeah, we've got a bit of investment, it's nice, but it's not enough. But we're going to become a cooperative in the next few weeks. We're going to become a cooperative with the writers and with the journalists. So I've just been realizing that you actually don't need the big mega books. Cooperative offers another route around, instead of going the traditional startup, Series A funding, etc., etc. No, you can do it with nothing. You can just do it with the people around you, and that's kind of your value. So, yeah, it's hard to fundraise, but let's get creative. Let's find a way to do it.
Spend my time going to Ollie. No, don't say that.
I was going to say that. I just get constantly told to shut up, and I guess some places we need to build a consensus and we need to work with people, and it doesn't always help going around knocking heads off or whatever. And just generally speaking, I'm an accelerationist, so we go through, not around. So, engage to subvert.
Nice. Right, I'm really excited about this bit now. I feel like Davina McCall. We're going to go live to the marquee, are we, Shirley? Is this true? Okay, hi, Reese. Here's one of our young co-operators. What's the question from the marquee?
Hi, so this is on behalf of a submitted question to the QR from the room in here. So I guess it'd be to all of you or whoever sort of has the appetite to answer it. But is there any appetite in the Northwest to democratise the NHS?
Ooh, see, this is where we need Mr. Burnham, isn't it? Not that we want to speak on his half, but he would simply say, yes, I'm fairly certain. One of the, in fact, Grace, did you want to comment on this?
I just wanted to say very quickly that, so there's, as you know, we've talked about this, there's exciting stuff going on all over the country, particularly when it comes to like social care co-ops. The other thing that's been happening specifically in the Northwest has been health workers organising. There have been a series of strikes, as some of you will know, of healthcare workers demanding fair pay, basically, and kind of better working conditions. And the Northwest, I interviewed a couple of people who were involved in that strike a while ago, was one of the places where they've had a number of significant successes. Why was that? This was because this was a campaign that was really driven by workers from the ground up. It was a kind of a more democratic, worker-led campaign to say, look, we've seen these examples of unfairness in how these pay scales are worked out. Let's actually come together and try and do something about it. Obviously with support from the union, from Unison, but really with workers getting very, very engaged. And if you're talking about how to democratize an organization like the NHS, or even any organization, it starts with the people who run that organization and actually the people who use that organization really just stepping up and saying, you know, this is our place. We take responsibility for it and we want to say in how it's governed. That's how, you know, economic democracy has spread for centuries. It's been by workers stepping forward and saying, actually, we've had enough. We're going to make our voices heard collectively. So in that sense, I think democratization is happening from a kind of structural top-down level. I think we're potentially moving in the opposite direction from some of the plans that we might be seeing from the Health Secretary. But that's why it's so important to have people organise, not just workers, patients as well, to be able to make their preferences known.
Thank you. And yeah, there's a really great model in Yorkshire, the Equal Care Co-op. I'm sure many of you know, where they've brought together the workers and the beneficiaries and the commissioners. They're a platform co-op actually. The reason they make the efficiencies is through use of technology. But again, Equal Care Co-op are really suffering from being able to fundraise, because the members that can contribute to growing that proposition, are, the people that need it the most and maybe are not the most wealthy. So it's a real challenge. Did you want to comment on that, Steve? Were you looking at me like for a comment? Should we, the NHS? No. Please no. Okay, we've got another question. We've got one here and then one there and then one there. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, yeah.
Can you stand up? Sorry.
Oh, yes.
We're doing that way. So
yes. Yes, Vivian Woodell, the Mid-Counties Co-operative. A number of you have been quite critical of the current government, and I understand the points you've made, but this government has made a historic commitment to work to double the size of the cooperative and mutual economy, and we have heard from a number of people about that. I think we'll probably be hearing from Gareth Thomas a bit later, some more about it. I'd be interested to hear your reflections on that, because it does appear to be a very genuine commitment to work for that, and that perhaps recognises that we need a different kind of economy. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, on that commitment and what could be achieved through it.
Okay, look, these lot are all like looking the other way at the moment. I sit on the Mutuals Council actually, Vivian, so I can tell you exactly what's happening. So, like I say, the government has made that commitment, and there is a council, and the Mutuals Council involves all the trade bodies, so ourselves, Co-operatives UK, the Building Society Association, the Employee Ownership Association, the Association of Financial Mutuals, looking in the room to see if I've missed anybody, and some of the larger cooperatives and mutuals like Nationwide, Co-op Group, Arup and Arla. And there's a whole kind of series of work streams that are being looked at the moment, and then each of the sectors, ABCUL, the Association of British Credit Unions. So there's a whole kind of series of work streams that have been proposed, and then what the government's actually looking to do is like which one of those are low-hanging fruit, if you like, which ones are easy to enable, which ones are going to need legislation to change it, which ones are going to need significant cash funding. But the challenge, I think, at the moment is that some of the things that would lend itself well, I mean, the NHS started as a cooperative, that's where the whole thing came from. So if you look at something like the NHS, water, the post office, some of the big ticket items have got these kind of colossal kind of treasury deficits. And like I say, what doesn't happen well with cooperations, that magic funds suddenly appear to be able to deliver it. So yeah, there's a lot going on through those work streams, and let's say Gareth will make comment on it, I'm sure, shortly. But what I was going to say is James Wright, our policy officer, and Cheryl, our chair, are plugged into the delivery of that. So any of you, particularly the UK co-ops, that you want to feed into those work streams, we have got policy sessions to enable you to do that. So, and I also want to make sure we get this lady in the purple top as well. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Rose. Alan Sandram from the National Members Council. This is a question to Steve. What would Alan Partridge think of our present situation?
I think he'd think that cooperatives were some sort of Stalinist subterfuge. And he'd have nothing to do with them. Yeah, that's what Alan would do.
Brilliant. And over here, please.
I'll stand up. I'm Saha. I work for the Wales Cooperative Centre in the community-led housing team. I totally agree with what you were saying about using different mediums and storytelling. We recently put on a community-led housing play, quite emotional, quite funny, but the feedback from that, from the young people that attended in particular, was like, I want to frickin' start a housing cooperative now. It was really exciting. But I guess one of the things we really have issues with in Wales with community-led housing is that even though the policies exist, you know, around housing cooperatives, community land trusts, One Planet developments, which isn't only Wales policy at the moment, I've missed one, co-housing schemes. Local councillors don't understand them, don't know about them, literally think housing cooperatives are illegal. So yeah, I guess hearing that the local council in Manchester is on board with Beyond the Music and other organisations is really encouraging. But has that always been the case? And do you still have challenges around that?
So yeah, I'm happy to take this one. Again, there is legislation coming through on housing cooperatives as well, because currently there's an issue around security of tenure in the UK. So some of this legislative stuff needs addressing, which is what the government is doing. But you're absolutely right. What my experience is you'll get great leaders like Andy Burnham and Bev Craig, and they'll be visionary and they'll understand exactly what needs to happen. And then you literally hit the legal department of the council who, you know, computer says no. Yeah, you know, you get this quite a lot. We've had, you know, council saying, you know, you can't be a member of a cooperative. We've had the business, you know, affairs department. In fact, our business is making a resource for all councils with CCIN over here. Nicola, give us a wave. I know you've got a lot to say on this. But yeah, we're making a resource for council staff. Because like I say, doing things differently is really hard. People like, you know, they're time poor, they're dealing with loads of parking tickets at Manchester Council. And, you know, that it doesn't, when you ask them to do something entirely different and entirely out of the comfort zone, it's like that classic saying used to be, nobody got, you know, fired for hiring IBM. It's like it really, really scares, you know, local councils and city regions. So some better than others. And let's say CCI, how many council members have you got now, Nicola? Yeah, so 146 councils in the UK declare themselves as cooperative councils, meaning that they've got an ambition to work more cooperatively, not that the council itself is a cooperative. So yeah, there is progress, but yeah, it's the education again. Yeah.
One last question, final.
Hi, my name is Lee, a National Members Council member. I'm going to show my age a little bit now in this sort of question and a little bit of thought process, really. I remember back in the day watching Frank Bruno fight, and I also remember watching England nearly make it to the World Cup, and I also remember watching Andy Murray win Wimbledon. And the one thing that sort of springs to mind is that in each of those events, the whole country was around it. So I remember people, you know, I need to go home, I need the day off, bringing in sick because they wanted to watch the game or whatever was going on. And I think the way we're going forward in terms of cooperatives in the UK is that we're almost trying to dominate the UK, because that's, in my head, I think that's what we're trying to do, and I mean it in a positive way, that we want to cover the whole of the UK with cooperative and the cooperative movement. The one thing about those events that's happened is that everyone knew about it, and everyone was behind it. and you couldn't walk anywhere or go anywhere or do anything different because it was just there. It was in the supermarket, it was on the telly, it was on adverts, people were endorsing it. There was just so much energy about it. And I just think, how can we do that in terms of a cooperative movement within the UK? Because it almost feels that we have got so much already across the country in terms of representation through a cooperative movement. There's so many good stories, so many things that we're trying to do. And we're also almost caught up in trying to explain what the movement's about and trying to figure out how to get our member owners engaged. We're constantly talking about how can we educate them, how can we make them aware of what we are. And I think there's probably a little thing that we could probably think doing differently is how can we make it an event across the UK so that people are aware of it and they're engaged on it. Maybe we need a little bit of endorsement by somebody famous who might be sat on the stage over here. But I think we've got such a great story that's happening across the country. But it's how do you, even taking today's environment, there's people outside there now who are walking past. They don't know what's going on in their own town because probably will never hear of it or never see it. So for me, and I think it's just echoing, how can we bring that energy and that vibe of when those great events happen across the UK, so that people know about it, and it becomes an event. And I think by doing that, it'll help the education because people will know what's going on, because this is what we're about. And it feels a little bit embarrassing at the same time. People have mentioned it that we grew the cooperative movement here, but everyone else is doing really good about it. It's almost like not quite getting that World Cup win. So I suppose it's a little bit of thought process, but a little bit of how can we turn the movement into an actual movement within the UK. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. And I'm going to turn to, I'd say, one of the most influential influencers of our time at the moment to answer that one, Grace.
I didn't think you were going to come to me, but sure. The things that you were highlighting there, those events, I remember walking through the streets of London during the World Cup and seeing delight and joy on people's faces, connection between random people, because they were all participating in this event. And I spoke to so many people afterwards because I found it so fascinating. People were like, I wish life was like this all the time. I wish that there were things that I could talk to people about where we felt connected, we felt like we were all participating in the same thing, that we were all swept up in this moment, this movement. And again, I think it comes back to this point of so many of us are living these atomized lives where we don't know what we're missing because we've never known any different, particularly for young people. And, it's cliche to talk about the role of social media. I think that is a problem, but it's more than that. It's about the culture that we have, which focuses on individual competition, which focuses on pushing people out of the way to get to the top. Too often it's like escaping where you've come from to get somewhere else. And then when you achieve that, you end up in this world of fear and anxiety and competition. And if you are left behind, you feel like, oh, I'm a loser, I can't get anywhere. This whole system that we've set up is designed to divide people against each other so that they can't experience those moments of collective joy of the kind that you get at big sporting events. So I think the question for this movement, again, is how do you make what we're doing about collective joy, about belonging, about interdependence and mutual care, not just like, I'm going to explain to you what a cooperative is, and this is how much GDP it could add to your local economy, but like, what are you missing in your life as a society, as a movement? And how can we come together to, yes, solve the cost of living crisis and solve the democratic deficit, but more than that, give people back that sense of what's missing. So, I'll hand over maybe to someone else who's better at storytelling than I am to think about how you tell that story. But yeah, I think that's really what we've got to be connecting with.
Well, I think I don't have an answer here, but I know that you're right in what you say. That to me is like the sort of $1 million question: is how do you get that message across? How do you storytell and how do you make co-op sexy? I think there is a way of doing it. And as Grace said, it's it's doing really what our sort of bad actors have been doing, which is sequestering humanity to sell things, to commodifying storytelling, commodifying things that touch us and move us and things we can identify with, things that bring us together, is taking a leaf out of their book and stealing it back, stealing art and stealing culture back to communicate our story. That's and also reminding ourselves that that there has been a revolution in this country that was really sort of cemented by Margaret Thatcher, which is to regard ourselves as individuals, and that anything other than that is some sort of crypto, Marxist attempt to change the country. Is where we're at, and it's that people. It's like a big secret. Don't tell people that if they band together, all their lives will improve. It's like, please don't tell people that, otherwise, where will that end? So that there is a sort of an unspoken conspiracy amongst people who don't want cooperatives to thrive because it benefits lots of people, but it will probably cause problems for a small number of people, a small number of wealthy people. So the more complicated the messages, the better for them. So that's I think the next task is communicating that, like you say, in a meaningful way, and not making it sound like homework. So it sounds like what it is, which is a sort of a celebration of humanity and human potential, and it becomes self-fulfilling. It becomes, when people feel valued, they become more productive. All roads lead to Rome. When it comes to the cooperative mindset, we all benefit, and it's. I can't think of the right story, but I'm going to start straight after this finishes thinking about it. But
Sarah, I believe you wanted to comment.
It's to create that tipping point in anything, in when you find out about a new artist, a new band, a new film, a new anything, it's collective enthusiasm. And that spreads in the old days through work, spoken word, your friends recommending stuff. Now it's through social media, hopefully positive social media. And so it's creating that collective enthusiasm. It can be done. It needs a strategy and it needs a sort of a point where everyone comes together. But it can be done. Yeah, absolutely. And it should be done.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And Ollie, have you got any final words you want to say before we finish this session? That's unusual. Okay, well, thank you very much for a really brilliant session. I hope you can see that Greater Manchester is still pioneering, and we've had a brilliant discussion. So can we please thank our panel members, Sarah Pearson, Steve Coogan, Ollie Wilson, and Grace Blakeley. We have got a quick comfort break now, but we do want you to be back in here as prompt as far as possible. Steve will be staying around, but I just need to whiz him off for a quick media conversation. So if we let Steve go, you'll come back in, won't you, and say hello to people, yeah? Maybe.